The thumping bass of her playlist was a familiar comfort as 15-year-old Sarah Walker walked to Northwood High, but it was violently interrupted by the predatory hum of an engine. A gleaming white SUV, devoid of any official markings, materialized beside her, its tires kissing the curb with an unnerving precision that felt out of place on the sun-drenched, usually tranquil streets of Willow Creek Estates. Before she could fully process the shift, two men in dark tactical-style uniforms, cheap imitations of real law enforcement, stepped out, their presence instantly shattering the neighborhood's carefully curated illusion of peace. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She yanked out an earbud, the manufactured cheerfulness of Willow Creek, with its homeowner association-mandated perfection, suddenly feeling like a sinister backdrop. This was its control, she thought bitterly, escalating from passive-aggressive newsletters about lawn length to outright menace. The patches on their chests, WCCP, Willow Creek Community Patrol, looked like something from a low-budget movie. The taller one, Captain Rex Thorne, puffed out his chest. "Well, well, Bishop," he drawled, his voice slick with unearned authority, "look what we have here. Young lady, you seem to be loitering rather suspiciously, and if I am not mistaken, that is hardly school-appropriate attire for Northwood High." He gestured vaguely at her jeans and band t-shirt. His partner, Kyle Bishop, a silent hulking figure, just watched her with cold, flat eyes. "Loitering, I am walking to school," Sarah countered, her voice trembling less than she expected. Her father's words echoed in her mind, a lifeline. "Observe, Sarah, details, stay calm, do not let them see your fear. Northwood is just 2 blocks down." Thorne smirked, clearly enjoying himself. "That is what they all say, sweetheart, but you fit a certain profile, and we have had reports of unusual activity. We will need you to come with us, standard procedure, just a few questions." "Come with you? Who are you people?" Panic, sharp and cold, began to claw its way up her throat, but she fought it down. "You are not the police, I do not have to go anywhere with you." "Oh, but I think you do," Bishop rumbled, his first and only words. He moved with a surprising brutal speed. Before Sarah could scream or even brace herself, her arm was seized in Thorne's vice-like grip. Her backpack, a comforting weight moments before, slithered from her shoulder, thudding onto the pristine sidewalk. She felt the rasp of heavy-duty plastic. As her wrists were yanked behind her back, the zip ties cinched painfully tight, a small choked cry escaped her as they frog-marched her towards the SUV's open rear door. Through a dizzying wave of terror and disbelief, her eyes darted across the street, snagging on a detail. Mrs. Henderson's lace curtains twitched, then fell still, a silent witness to the perfect morning and the perfect crime unfolding in broad daylight. Then the car door slammed, plunging her into a terrifying alien darkness. The slammed car door that had swallowed Sarah Walker into darkness left an echoing void on the corner of Sycamore and Elm. Behind her starched lace curtain, Mrs. Henderson finally let out a shaky breath, her hand flying to her mouth, the image of the white SUV seared into her mind. Miles away, in the quiet of his home office, John Walker, a man whose life had been a study in controlled force and strategic calm, was about to have his carefully ordered world fractured by a single fateful phone call. It was 10:17 a.m. Northwood High's attendance office, polite, procedural. "Mr. Walker, this is Carol from Northwood. We are just calling to verify Sarah's absence today. Is she unwell?" John's blood ran cold. Sarah was never unwell without him knowing. Never. "No," he said, his voice preternaturally calm, a chilling counterpoint to the sudden ice in his veins. "She left for school at her usual time." The voice on the other end kept talking, but John was already moving. His training, honed over years as a Green Beret and now as an elite skills instructor, kicked in. Panic was a luxury he could not afford. Action was a necessity. He ended the call, his mind a razor-sharp instrument already sifting through possibilities, each one darker than the last. A quick check of Sarah's phone locator app showed her last ping at 7:58 a.m., right near the edge of Willow Creek Estates on her usual route. Then nothing. Offline. He was out the door in under 60 seconds, his jaw set. Arriving at the quiet, sun-dappled corner Sarah's phone indicated, his eyes, trained to see what others missed, scanned the scene. The sidewalk was pristine, almost too clean. But then he saw it. Sarah's navy blue backpack, lying forlornly near the curb, its contents slightly spilled, as if dropped in a struggle. A wave of cold fury washed over him, quickly compartmentalized. He knelt, examining the faint, almost invisible impressions on the soft grass verge beside the curb. Wide tire tracks, heavier than a standard sedan. They had parked right here. Two WSIM maintenance workers, trimming hedges a little way down the street, glanced nervously as John approached them. They were regular staff, not Thorne's patrol. "Morning," John said, his voice even, almost gentle, yet with an undercurrent that made both men stop their work. "I am looking for my daughter. She walks this way to school. Did you see a 15-year-old girl, brown hair, navy backpack, perhaps talking to anyone in a white SUV this morning?" The men exchanged uneasy glances. "I cannot say we saw a girl, mister," one mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "But there is that white SUV, belongs to the WCCP, the community patrol guys. Captain Thorne, he drives it mostly." "WCP," John pressed, his gaze unwavering. "What kind of patrol?" "Sort of security for the homeowner association," the other man offered, fidgeting with his shears. "They, keep an eye on things. Thorne is real serious about the rules." He lowered his voice. "Acts like he is a real cop if you ask me. Give some of us the creeps." John nodded slowly, absorbing the information. Amateur, overzealous, and now almost certainly abductors. "Thanks," he said, the single word carrying a weight that made them step back. Walking back to his car, Sarah's backpack clutched in his hand, the pieces began to slot into place. This was not a random act. This was an abuse of fabricated power. Inside his vehicle, he pulled out his phone, scrolling to a secure contact. "Mark, it is John Walker," he said when the call connected, his voice low and urgent. "I have got a priority one situation. My daughter Sarah, she has been taken, possible abduction by a pseudo-cop outfit here in Willow Creek, calls themselves WCC, run by a guy named Thorne. I need everything you can find on them, fast and discreet. This is off the books until we know what we are dealing with." He listened for a moment, understood. "Thanks, Mark." Ending the call, John stared at the pristine, silent street. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they had his daughter. They had no idea who they had just provoked. His hunt had begun. While John Walker's cold fury began to coalesce into a precise plan of action, his daughter Sarah was miles and a lifetime away from the familiar comfort of her street. The journey in the back of the white SUV had been mercifully short, a terrifying blur of tinted windows, the stale scent of cheap air freshener failing to mask something acrid beneath, and the rough fabric of the seat against her cheek. Then an abrupt stop, the engine cutting out, followed by the clunk of doors opening. Sarah was hauled out, not roughly, but with an impersonal efficiency that was somehow more chilling. They were at the edge of Willow Creek Estates, at a dilapidated single-story maintenance building she vaguely remembered seeing from the distant bike path. A forgotten relic of the community's earlier development. Weeds clawed at its faded paint, and a battered sign reading WA storage and maintenance authorized personnel only hung crookedly by one screw. This apparently was the grand headquarters of the Willow Creek Community Patrol. Inside, the air was damp and cool, smelling of mildew, stale coffee, and a faint metallic tang. A single bare bulb flickered overhead in a small windowless office furnished with a scarred metal desk, two mismatched chairs, and a filing cabinet that looked like it had lost a fight. Captain Rex Thorne gestured her into one of the chairs, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. Officer Kyle Bishop simply stood by the door, arms crossed, a silent, imposing block of a man. "Right then, young lady," Thorne began, leaning back in his squeaky chair as if he were a seasoned detective in a high-stakes interrogation. "Let us start again. Who are you really working with? Who sent you to scout our community?" Sarah stared at him, genuine confusion warring with her fear. "Working with, I already told you, I am just a student. I go to Northwood High. My name is Sarah Walker." Even as she spoke, her father's voice resonated in her memory. "Stay calm, answer truthfully but do not volunteer, and always observe." She forced herself to catalog the room, one door in where Bishop stood, no other exits visible. The desk drawers were closed, Thorn had a cheap walkie-talkie clipped to his belt. The overhead light flickered again. Walker, you say? Thorn tapped a pen on the desk. We know you're kind, sneaking around, taking pictures, mapping out vulnerabilities. Are you with one of those activist groups, the ones trying to discredit fine, upstanding communities like Willow Creek? His questions were nonsensical, paranoid. I was not taking pictures, Sarah insisted, keeping her voice as even as she could. I was listening to music, my phone was in my pocket. Thorn leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial calm. Do not play games with me, girl. We have protocols. We know how to deal with troublemakers. This is a private matter of community security. No one even knows you are here. He seemed to relish that last part. A shiver traced its way down Sarah's spine at his implication. But then through the thin wall behind Thorn's desk, she heard a muffled snippet of conversation, another male voice, something about shift change and grabbing lunch. So there were more of them, at least one other. Good to know. Thorn glanced impatiently at his watch, then at Bishop. All right, keep an eye on her. I need to make a call, see how the supervisor wants to proceed with this one. We cannot keep her in this glorified closet all day. If she is not more cooperative by afternoon, we will have to arrange alternative processing. Alternative processing, the words hung in the stale air, heavy with unspoken threat. Sarah's stomach clenched. But as Thorn stepped out of the room, his cheap walkie-talkie crackling, a tiny spark of her father's resolve ignited within her. They were amateurs, dangerous ones, playing at a game they did not understand, and in their arrogance they might just make a mistake. She just had to be ready to see it. Her gaze swept the room again, methodically imprinting every detail. Her fear was a cold, hard knot, but her mind was clear. She would watch, she would listen, she would survive. As Sarah Walker fought to master her fear within the WCCP's makeshift prison, cataloging every detail, John was already processing the first pieces of actionable intelligence from Mark Olson. The information painted a grimly predictable picture. The white SUV was indeed registered to the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, a clear overstep of their remit. Captain Rex Thorn, the self-styled leader of the community patrol, was a former mall security guard, dismissed for overzealous enforcement and a string of minor harassment complaints. The WCCP itself had no official standing, no legal authority whatsoever. They were, as John had suspected, a gang of vigilantes with HOA funding and a dangerous god complex, led by a man playing out a power fantasy. This confirmation, however grim, solidified John's focus. Knowing what he was dealing with was one thing, knowing where was the next crucial step. The maintenance building Sarah had been taken to was isolated, a forgotten corner of Willow Creek's sprawling property, the perfect den for Thorn's pseudo-cops. That night, under the cloak of a moonless sky, John Walker became the shadow he was trained to be. Dressed in dark non-reflective clothing, he moved with a silence and economy of motion that was second nature. The perimeter of the maintenance building and its small surrounding yard was his first objective. He observed from a distance initially, noting the single flickering sodium lamp that cast long dancing shadows, leaving significant areas of darkness. There were no sophisticated security cameras, no motion detectors, just the cheap imposing authority of the building itself and whoever was inside. He spent over an hour in the cold, damp air, mapping the area in his mind. Two figures, likely WCCP members, were visible through a grimy window in what appeared to be a break room. Their occasional bursts of laughter and the glow of a television screen suggested a lack of professional watch. He noted their sloppy, infrequent patrols around the building, one man every 30 minutes or so taking the same predictable route, his flashlight beam cutting lazy arcs. Child's play. John circled wider, identifying potential blind spots, approach routes, and crucially, escape paths. A section of chain-link fence at the rear of the property was loose at the bottom. An overgrown cluster of bushes offered deep cover, uncomfortably close to a side door that looked less sturdy than the front. He noted a window on the far side, partially obscured by a leaning stack of old pallets, its latch possibly compromised. It was during his close approach to that window that his heart nearly stopped. He was crouched low, examining the frame, when the side door crept open not 20 feet away. One of Thorn's men stepped out. stretching and yawning, then fumbled for a cigarette. John froze, melting into the deeper shadow of a large untrimmed hedge, every muscle tensed, his breathing controlled to an almost imperceptible level. The man lit his cigarette, the flare of the match briefly illuminating his bored face. He took a few puffs, oblivious, then grunted and went back inside, the door clicking shut. John let out a slow, silent breath. Too close, but it confirmed their carelessness. Back in the temporary anonymity of his car before dawn, John reviewed his mental notes. The WCCP were amateurs, but amateurs with his daughter. Mark Olson could eventually secure warrants, assemble a tactical team. But eventually was a word that clawed at John's gut. He did not know what alternative processing Thorne had threatened Sarah with, but every instinct screamed that time was a luxury Sarah did not have. These men were unpredictable, operating outside any rules. He could not risk bureaucratic delays. He could not risk a botched, heavy-handed official raid that might spook them into doing something desperate. The decision, when it came, was cold and clear, born of a father's love and a warrior's pragmatism. He would get Sarah out himself. Tonight. It would not be an assault. It would be an extraction, precise and silent. He drove home as the first hint of gray lightened the eastern sky, not to rest, but to make his own quiet preparations. He selected a few specific tools from a locked case in his workshop, items chosen not for destruction but for stealth and efficiency. A slim pry bar, a compact multi-tool, a small high-powered flashlight with a red filter, dark gloves. His face was a mask of grim determination. The time for gathering intelligence was over. Dawn was breaking. It was time to bring his daughter home. The first gray tendrils of dawn were just beginning to paint the eastern sky when John Walker, moving like a phantom, approached the western perimeter of the WCCP maintenance compound. The brief period of near total darkness before sunrise, when alertness was often at its lowest, was his chosen window. His preparations had been swift, minimal, precise. Every tool had a purpose. Every step was calculated. His daughter Sarah was in that building, held by arrogant fools playing a dangerous game, and the thought of Thorne's casual threat of alternative processing fueled the cold, controlled fire in his gut. He slipped through the loose section of chain-link fence he had identified hours earlier, the overgrown weeds muffling any sound. The air was still, broken only by the distant chirp of early birds and the low intermittent hum from a nearby electrical substation. He moved along the building's shadowed side, his senses hyper-alert. As predicted, the single patrolling WCCP guard, a heavy-set man John did not recognize from his brief earlier encounter with Thorne and Bishop, was making his rounds with bored indifference, his flashlight beam a lazy metronome. John waited motionless in the deep shadow of the leaning pallets until the guard passed his position, then moved with liquid speed. Before the guard could even register a change in the shadows behind him, John was on him. One hand clamped over the man's mouth, stifling any cry. An arm snaked around his throat in a perfectly applied chokehold. There was a brief, desperate struggle, quickly subdued. John lowered the unconscious man gently to the ground, efficiently securing his hands and feet with heavy-duty cable ties he had brought and relieved him of his cheap walkie-talkie. One down. The side door, as he had suspected, was poorly secured. A minute's focused work with a slim pry bar, shielded by his body, and the lock clicked open with a barely audible snick. He eased the door open an inch, listening. Faint sounds of a television, a low murmur of voices, the break room he had observed. He bypassed it, his objective clear. Sarah had been in what Thorne called his office. He moved through a short, dimly lit corridor, his rubber-soled boots making no sound on the grimy linoleum. He paused at a door marked Office Authorized Personnel Only, the lettering peeling. He could hear a low, intermittent snoring from within, Kyle Bishop most likely, if Thorne had left him on guard duty. John tested the knob. Unlocked. Thorne's arrogance was proving to be his undoing. Easing the door open, John confirmed his assessment. Bishop was slumped in the desk chair, head lolled back, mouth open in a sonorous snore, the television in the corner flickering with an early morning infomercial. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the desk beside him. John moved with the same swift precision as before. Bishop never even woke up. He was incapacitated and secured before his next snore could fully form. 2 down. And then he saw her. Sarah was in the far corner, curled on the floor, awake, her eyes wide in the dim light filtering from the corridor. Relief, fierce and overwhelming, washed through John, but he kept it locked down. He put a finger to his lips, then moved to her side. "Dad," she mouthed, tears welling. He quickly and expertly cut the zip ties on her wrists, his touch gentle. "Are you hurt?" he whispered, his voice barely a breath. She shook her head, rubbing her raw wrists, numb, just scared. "Thorn, he was in here earlier, he went to a back room through there." She gestured to another door at the rear of the office. "He said something about processing me this afternoon." John's jaw tightened. "Not anymore." He helped her to her feet. "Stay behind me no matter what." The door to the back room was slightly ajar. John could hear Thorn's voice, low and irritated, apparently on a phone call. "Do not care what the HOA guidelines say, this girl is a troublemaker. Yeah, by noon. We will have her officially transferred, no paper trail on our end." John pushed the door open fully, Rex Thorn, leaning against another metal desk, phone pressed to his ear, looked up, his eyes widening in disbelief, then confusion, then dawning fear as he saw John, a figure of silent lethal intent filling the doorway. Sarah was a pale shadow behind him. "Who the hell are you?" Thorn stammered, dropping the phone. He fumbled for the walkie-talkie on his belt. "Does not matter who I am," John said, his voice a low growl. He crossed the small room in 2 strides, his hand shooting out, deflecting Thorn's arm as he reached for the radio, then twisting it with practiced ease. Thorn cried out, a yelp of pain and shock, as the radio clattered to the floor. "You took my daughter," John stated, his eyes like chips of ice. "That was a very big mistake." Thorn, his face ashen, found a sliver of his old bluster. "This is an official WCCP facility. You are trespassing. I will have you arrested." John almost smiled. He picked up a pair of zip ties from Thorn's desk, identical to the ones that had bound Sarah. "I do not think so." Within seconds, Captain Rex Thorn, the self-proclaimed authority of Willow Creek, was securely bound, his bravado completely gone, replaced by a whimpering terror. John looked at him with cold contempt. "It is over, Thorn." He turned to Sarah, his expression softening instantly. "Let us go home." He led her out the way he had come, past the unconscious, bound forms of Thorn's officers, and into the cool, clean air of the approaching dawn. As they slipped through the gap in the fence and into the gray anonymity of the waking town, Sarah leaned against him, a shuddering sigh of relief escaping her. John held her close for a moment, the father eclipsing the soldier. "You are safe now, Sarah Bear," he whispered. "You are safe." But as he scanned the quiet streets, his mind was already shifting. This part was done. The next was just beginning. The rising sun cast long shadows as John Walker drove away from the dilapidated maintenance building, Sarah beside him, wrapped in a blanket he kept in the car. She was quiet, leaning against his arm, the adrenaline from her ordeal slowly ebbing away, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake. For John, however, the adrenaline was still a controlled burn. His daughter was safe, but the individuals responsible for her terror were still, in a larger sense, at liberty, their corrupt little empires still standing. That was about to change. His first stop was a pre-arranged, discreet location where Mark Olson had arranged for a trusted female colleague, a victim support specialist, to meet them. Sarah needed to feel secure, to recount her experience in a calm environment, and John needed to ensure his next steps would not be compromised by his immediate presence at a crime scene he had technically just created. As Sarah, pale but composed, began to give a statement, John stepped away to make his own call to Olson. "Mark," John's voice was low, devoid of any triumph, only grim purpose. "Sarah is out. She is safe. The WCCP facility, that old maintenance shed on the east perimeter of Willow Creek, has 3 officers currently incapacitated and secured inside, Thorn, Bishop, and 1 other. They need to be picked up before anyone stumbles upon them, or they manage to get loose. Sarah's testimony will confirm unlawful detention, among other things. Thorn was on the phone when I found him, talking about transferring her by noon, no paper trail. You need to move fast. He then gave Olson a concise, detailed summary of the layout, the lack of real security, and the individuals involved. Mark Olson did not waste time. Within the hour, a convoy of official, unmarked law enforcement vehicles, a mix of FBI and state police tactical units, descended upon the WCCP's ramshackle headquarters. There was no dramatic shootout, no prolonged siege. It was a swift, professional takedown. Officers, armed with federal warrants, breached the building, finding the 3 WCCP members exactly as John had described, bound and seething, their pathetic charade of authority utterly dismantled. As detectives and forensic teams began their meticulous work, the true nature of Thorne's operations started to bleed out. From the dingy office, they found a stack of crudely printed citation forms, detailing ludicrous offenses, suspicious footpath deviation, failure to comply with community walking protocol, unauthorized photography of homeowner association property. Most were targeting teenagers or unfamiliar visitors. A locked filing cabinet, easily opened, revealed files on several Willow Creek residents, containing handwritten notes of surveillance and petty infractions. In Thorne's desk, they discovered a binder labeled WCCP Operational Protocols, a document filled with self-important jargon and illegally assumed powers, shockingly authorized by what appeared to be minutes from a Willow Creek Homeowner Association board meeting. Financial records on a cheap laptop linked payments from homeowner association funds, disguised as community safety enhancements, directly to a shell corporation named Aegis Community Solutions, a company Olson's initial check had flagged as having ties to Rex Thorne himself. They even found a box of the fake WCCP patches and a few cheap imitation security badges, one ostentatiously labeled Chief Thorne. By late morning, Mark Olson called John. "We have got them, John, and the place is a gold mine of prosecutable idiocy. Your daughter is a brave kid, her statement is solid gold. But it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. The paper trail from Thorne's office does not just stop with him. It leads straight up the ladder, directly implicating members of the Willow Creek Homeowner Association Board. This is not just a few rogue clowns. This was sanctioned." John listened, a grim satisfaction settling in. The immediate threat to Sarah was over. Now, the larger, more insidious rot within Willow Creek Estates was about to be exposed to the harsh light of real justice. Mark Olson's grim prediction that the rabbit hole plunged deep into Willow Creek Estates proved to be an understatement. The evidence, meticulously gathered from Rex Thorne's makeshift office, combined with Sarah Walker's unshakable testimony, unraveled the homeowner association's rotten core with alarming speed. Federal and state investigators, armed with a slew of warrants, descended upon the homes of select Drew Homeowner Association board members and the almost invisible office of Aegis Community Solutions. The arrests followed swiftly. Thorne, Bishop, and their handful of WCCP patrolmen were the first to be charged, facing a litany of felonies, including unlawful detention, impersonating law enforcement, and conspiracy. But the hammer of justice did not stop there. Within weeks, several prominent members of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association Board, including its overbearing president, found themselves in handcuffs, indicted for misuse of community funds, conspiracy to commit unlawful acts, and reckless endangerment for sanctioning and bankrolling Thorne's illegal militia. The local news stations had a field day, plastering the once pristine image of Willow Creek Estates across screens with headlines screaming of corruption and vigilantism. The initial shock among residents quickly morphed into widespread outrage. Community meetings, once sparsely attended affairs focused on lawn maintenance and holiday decorations, became packed, fiery forums where homeowners demanded accountability and wholesale change. The carefully constructed facade of serene, orderly Willow Creek had been irrevocably shattered, revealing the rot beneath. The legal and financial fallout was immense. Civil suits, spearheaded by John Walker on behalf of Sarah and joined by other families who had previously been intimidated or dismissed by Thorne's WCCP, mounted against the indicted board members and the now-defunct Homeowner Association. Faced with overwhelming legal pressure and public condemnation, the Willow Creek Homeowners Association was formally dissolved by court order. In its place, a new resident-led interim council was formed. Their first act, a commitment to complete transparency and a vow to rebuild trust. They worked closely with city officials and legitimate local law enforcement to establish a new community charter, one that emphasized genuine safety through cooperation, not control through intimidation. The name Willow Creek Estates, now tainted by scandal, was overwhelmingly voted by residents to be retired. They chose Hollow Commons, a nod to the area's natural geography and a symbol of a fresh, more open beginning. The reign of the Shadow Patrol was decisively over. The community was at last taking back its voice and its peace. The headlines would eventually fade, but the changes in Hollow Commons were designed to be profound and lasting. As autumn leaves began to paint the streets of the newly christened Hollow Commons in hues of gold and crimson, a different kind of quiet settled over the Walker household. Not the oppressive silence of fear that had briefly gripped their lives, but the comforting quiet of healing and renewed strength. The headlines had faded, the legal battles concluded, and the architects of the WCCP's reign of terror were facing the consequences of their actions. Sarah, though more watchful of the world around her, had rediscovered her stride. The shadows of her ordeal were still there, but they no longer dictated her steps. She walked to Northwood High with a new quiet confidence, her resilience a testament to her spirit and the unwavering support of her father. One evening, sitting with John on their porch swing, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance, she finally asked Dad, why do people like Thorne do things like that, try to control everyone? John put an arm around her, his gaze thoughtful. Sometimes, Sarah, people mistake power for strength. They forget that true strength lies in protecting others, not dominating them. They build their little kingdoms on fear because they are afraid themselves. He paused, then added, but they also forget that there are always people willing to stand up to them, people like you who stayed strong and observant. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. You stood up to them, Dad. A rare soft smile touched John's lips. Always for you, Sarah Bear. In Hollow Commons, whispers of John Walker's quiet, decisive action circulated with a mixture of awe and profound respect. No one spoke of it loudly, but the legend of the unassuming father who had single-handedly dismantled a corrupt local power structure to save his daughter became a silent and indelible part of the community's reformed identity. He sought no accolades, content in the knowledge that his daughter was safe and that a measure of real justice had been restored. The system that had allowed such an abuse of power had been broken, and in its place, something better, more accountable, was beginning to grow. For John Walker, that was victory enough. The echoes of that terrible Tuesday morning would linger, but so too would the enduring lesson that courage, family, and an unwavering commitment to what is right could indeed topple any fake empire. Hey.